Hello, and thank you for tuning into Watermelon and Rhubarb. We are a movie, TV show, and media reviewing podcast. So if you love movies, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Miranda, and you can find me on Instagram at myrandamoviesmedia. And today I have a lovely guest host with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Huri.
Do you have a fun fact or anything about yourself?
Well, I really like movies, and my favorite movie is Prisoners. I believe it came out in 2013, and it's from the same director that did Arrival, the movie that we're talking about today. For those of you that don't know, Arrival is a 2016 movie directed by Denis Villeneuve.
And would you like to tell us a bit about the plot?
Spoiler free or filled with spoilers?
You can do spoilers. It's been out for a while. People have had plenty of time to see it.
All right. So a brief synopsis of Arrival is this world-renowned linguist is called upon when, I believe, 12 different alien spacecrafts land across the globe, and the military needs her help to figure out how to translate their language and figure out their goals and their ideas, and why they landed on Earth. Eventually, she finds out that their language gives them the ability to see time, see the future, but so I guess you can see the time in past, present, and future.
So now that we have that covered, let's start talking about the movie. Anything you want to talk about first? Why this movie? What's your favorite part? Sound design, cinematography?
I mean, I love everything about this movie, but my favorite sequence is definitely the scene where they get to meet the aliens. Mm-hmm. I just love everything about it, like them arriving on the site, like the musical score, just like the visual, like the cinematography of them like approaching the site, and then especially them going into like the chamber, going up into the spaceship, and then like seeing the aliens for the first time. And then the sound design is very good. It makes you feel very anxious. I know the very first time I watched it, it filled me with existential dread.
That's a good description. I felt very panicky, like you could feel it in your chest, like just overall panic. It's like feeling of dread, but like also wonder, and like that comes through the score, because the score like has this great sense of grandness, and it has a conclusion, but it's not fully complete. Like they know more is coming, but you know, these aliens are real, and we're seeing that, and they're seeing that, and we're seeing that through Louise's point of view, and it's so overwhelming for her because you hear her breathing, and then these long, powerful, deep chords, just long, they're drawn out, they just create this like grandness. There's also a sense of like claustrophobia.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they're like all in hazmat suits and all this, and you're going into this alien spaceship, and there's no gravity, but there is gravity, and you're seeing these things, these creatures who are giant, they look like squids, and it's just so overwhelming and powerful.
You pointed this out when we first were watching it, like because they're in hazmat suits, like you can hear their breathing more profoundly, and like Louise Banks's breathing was especially like heavy and quick, which kind of gives you more anxiety because you're just sitting there and you can feel what she's feeling, and it's very like panic attacky in a way. So.
Definitely panic attacky. Like you're sitting there and you're like, am I having a panic attack, or I'm just experiencing a panic attack from the character's point of view? The camera work for the whole scene is really great too. They have this like nice drawn out, very, very slow dolly zoom, and it just draws you in and just makes you tense.
It's building up all the suspense of like being able to see the aliens for the first time. Mm-hmm. There's this bird in a cage that they throw in there. I think the idea in the movie is to like show that there's not a loss of oxygen in the chamber.
Yeah, the bird's there to like show that if the bird can survive, then the humans can be in there.
Yeah. But then I feel like it also adds to the creepy atmosphere of the scene where you just hear this bird like chirping wildly as like the musical score is swelling, and then like the breathing, like the heavy scared breathing is like going on, and it just adds all these different sound effects, like all add to this tense atmosphere.
Yeah. And then the bird comes back later in the nightmare scene.
Yes.
Where she's like in a dream, and this bird just in your ear just chirping so loud and just creates this tenseness.
Yeah. Outside of, because I know that you're a big fan of dolly zooms, were there any other shots or anything that stood out to you?
There is. I have it in my notes somewhere. I literally time-stamped it because, well, mainly the whole scene where they see the aliens that we've been talking about, so like 28 minutes in. But later, I think there's a scene when they're in the spaceship and the camera starts with them upside down and it slowly flips. I don't know. It was just really cool to see because starting with something upside down and flipping it always creates this weird, not weird, but distorted point of view, which like Banks's character has throughout the whole movie, which just helps like reinforce that idea.
I feel like the only other movie, not to get off topic, but the only other movie I can think of that does like a full like, it starts upside down and does like a full spin is like Black Panther.
Yeah, that scene is really cool too. And there's one similar to it in Thor Ragnarok. They're like walking and they flip it, like a mirror flips, and I was like, that is cool. More people should do that because it just creates another level of like artistic value to it, and it also like can play into the plot of the story or the characters' motivations and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was in like the Grandmaster's like throne room or something, right?
Yeah, it was.
I remember that one. It was like a very cool transition.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Avengers, since we're there, did you know that Jeremy Renner's last name is a palindrome? So you can spell it the same way forward as backwards, like Taco Cat or Hannah, like Louise's daughter's name.
The big plot twist, I feel like, is really interesting, including her daughter, because the movie starts out with like what you think is, I mean, I guess you don't really think it's a flashback necessarily, but
seeing it the first time, you kind of assume at least the beginning of the movie, it's flashbacks, but later as it goes on.
You see Louise having a daughter and seeing her grow up, and then you see her daughter die, and it's all very sad and everything. But then as the movie goes on, you see what appears to be flashbacks to that introduction scene. And then you realize that once Louise has learned the alien language, that it's actually a glimpse into the future. She sees that path, and she sees what that life could be like. Like, she could have that daughter and get married to Jeremy Renner's character.
I believe his name's Ian.
Yes, right? You're right. Ian. Yes, she could get married to Ian and all that. But then because she can see into the future, she can theoretically change all that. She could choose to not marry him. She could choose to not have that daughter. She could choose to not have the daughter that dies. But the whole thing, I think the whole message of the movie is that even knowing that something like that could happen, it's not necessarily the end point, but it's the journey that gets you there that matters. And that's what I really liked about the movie. I mean, besides everything else, but
just everything. Great.
But yeah, I just feel like it's a very compelling thought. Like, even if we could know things about our futures, I mean, it gets into like paradox and things like that. Like, could you actually change it? I don't know, but
but then wouldn't it also take away from like free will? Like, how would that play into it? Because like, okay, I know my future self does this, but if I step on a butterfly over here, is that future going to change, or is that always set in stone? You know, like that type of thing. But, you know, time's non-linear in this movie. Well, at least from Louise's point of view. So, you know, it's a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Which is a Doctor Who reference for those who don't know. Not just complete nonsense, except it totally is.
One other thing, going just to the time thing that I was telling you earlier, the beginning of the universe began as the Big Bang, and so it was a moment of low entropy, and the inevitable heat death of the universe, where everything perishes and dies, that's going to be an event of high entropy. And so scientists have theorized that we can't, because time is non-linear, there's no real reason why we shouldn't be able to see into the future in the same way that we can see into the past, or we can remember the past. We should also technically be able to look into the future, but scientists theorize that because we're closer to the low entropy event, aka the Big Bang, that we can only perceive the past. But once we get closer to the high entropy event, which is going to be the heat death of the universe, we'll be able to see into the future, which not that anyone would really want to see into the future if that's the case, but
yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to see the future. Be like, oh yeah, by the way, on Tuesday the world's gonna catch on fire. No, thank you, please. I don't want to see the future. Then, no thanks.
But so I thought that was like a very interesting thing. Like if somehow eventually we could either evolve or if we get close enough to the end of the universe, then we'll be able to maybe see into the future. And in the same way that we can like look into the past, into our own past and things like that. So yeah. I thought that was an interesting thing related to the film.
It definitely is. I mean, there's tons of movies about time travel. Back to the Future.
Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, Avengers Endgame. There's more that I can't think of. Doctor
Looper.
Who. Yeah. But they always seem to have different rules, and it's always a device that gets them to time traveling. But it would be pretty cool if you learn this language and you immerse yourself and rewire your brain, that you could see all of time at any point in time, as long, like from your view. I think Louise asks Ian in the film if he knew his future, would he change anything? And he says, I think I would say what I mean more often. So like maybe it would help with like people communicating, because communicating is so important, especially since we're both communication majors.
Yeah.
It's all about communication. If you don't communicate, you can't get your points view out, you can't get your ideas and everything, and it really sucks if you can't communicate.
Well, I have two things, but so I think that's an interesting point, because like he's like an expert in mathematics and
physics somewhere
yeah.
in there.
And like stereotypically, like they have harder times like communicating more effectively and like being more emotionally ready.
Yeah, like they're like, what's the hard facts? They don't like look at the nonverbal cues or any of the intonation of anything. He literally walks in there and is like, do they understand math? And Louise,
Fibonacci.
Yeah, and they're like, no. And then Louise comes in and she's like, okay, we're gonna teach them some vocab words. We're gonna see how they think and then communicate that way through like a whiteboard and writing things on it. And it's like, that works. It actually helped them.
Yeah. There's a great scene that you pointed out as we were watching it, where she like breaks down basically the English language and like why she needed to teach them the most basic of building blocks and like vocabulary and sentence structure, because and as like the movie progresses, you see how that could go wrong, like them trying to translate their language to English and vice versa with I believe it was the Chinese. They were trying to communicate by playing a board game, and it was ineffective because the goal of the board game is to win, so things could be misinterpreted. And then Louise gets rushed at the end, and she's not able to like fully finish the lessons that she wanted. And so they get to a point where they get offered a weapon, but because they didn't spend enough time properly teaching the aliens terms and whatnot, they don't know if they actually mean like a weapon or they mean a tool or things like that. So
like, I think Louise says that our culture is messy. Words can mean the same thing. It's like a tool, or is it a weapon, or is it a gift? Like words mean so many different things, especially like if you go into like text talk. It's like we abbreviate so many things. If you show this to someone who's not fluent in your language, they're gonna be like, what is that word? That doesn't make sense. Even though it's like thanks, where people say THX, I think. Yeah. We know that, but if we were trying to teach someone else that, they wouldn't understand. So there's that like miscommunication, and then that causes a whole other issue problems. And they're like, we're gonna blow up the aliens because we're stupid. It's like all this other stuff.
Yeah. Going back to like the Ian thing, how you were saying like Dr. Banks asks him if he could see into the future, if he would change anything. When they first get to the alien site, we see the doctor who was first hired before Louise Banks is like medevaced out of the site because they couldn't handle the pressure of being there or whatever. And
they're like, oh, aliens, they're real? Okay, well, that doesn't sit with me very well.
I mean, it'd be pretty heavy material to deal with.
Which they definitely use. It is heavy. Every character is just bombarded with emotions throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. In one of the not flashbacks later on, we see her talking to her daughter, and she brings up how her parents are getting a divorce. Louise tells her that her father still loves her, but that she told Ian something that he wasn't ready to hear. It's assumed that the thing that she told him was that she's known the whole time that their daughter was going to perish, and that she saw this all back in the day when they were at the alien site together, and that he probably wasn't ready to hear that. And so it's kind of interesting that she asked him that when they're at the alien site if he could see the future, if he would do anything differently. And then later on, after she kind of reveals, we assume that she reveals that information, that she saw into the future. She saw they were going to get married. She saw that they were going to have a daughter, and that their daughter was going to die, that he couldn't handle that, and so that they ended up getting a divorce. I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe in the moment it seems like something that's not going to be as hard to deal with, but then when you later find out like the repercussions of someone being able to see into the future and them acting on that, I feel like it would be hard to deal with. Mm-hmm. So
I mean, like, I was thinking about it the other day. It's like, if I could see through my future, I don't know what I would do. How would one act? You would say these things, like Ian says, oh, I would say my feelings more, but would you? Would you actually? Because then what would that mean, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people are, for the most part, are constantly evolving and changing. Mm-hmm. If you said something like, oh, I'm going to express myself more, is it actually you being you, or is it like a different version of you because it's not who you are in that moment? And that's, I mean, it's hard to comprehend, like, you're you, but in 5 years you might not be the same you that you were 5 years prior. Mm-hmm. So it's just, because
we, at every moment in our life, we have a different version of ourselves. So it's like, the version I am now is extremely different from the version of 8th grade me, who was obsessed with like the Hunger Games and stuff. And like 5 years in the future, who knows what I'm going to be doing? It's like, we constantly evolve, and it's all done through building relationships and communicating and understanding the world around us. And it just, I don't know how Louise goes through this whole movie and is totally okay. I don't think she's okay, but you know, she deals with it.
Yeah. I think it just depends on the steadiness of the person, like their mindfulness or open-mindedness. Because in the movie, you like, after everything happens, you see glimpses of Louise's future, and you see like that she's teaching classes about like the language. So presumably this becomes a language that many people learn to speak, and so many people learn to be able to like see into the future. Yeah. And so I think that's an interesting concept, but this isn't explored at all really in the movie. But I think it would be an interesting thing to see the reaction to people that don't want to learn it or don't understand it, I guess, and to see how what sort of backlash there would be to people that would be like afraid of that or whatnot.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite part of the movie?
Well, the dolly zoom. It's the dolly zoom. I love dolly zooms. They're great. But I definitely like the sound design of the aliens, the heptapods. Mainly because, like, they're ginormous. They look like squids. You don't really get to see them, but they just have a very distinct sound. They literally did their research. They went and researched animals. They got sounds from, like, whales, octopuses, or octopi, I guess is technically how you would say it, right? Yeah?
Yeah, octopi.
Spiders, like elephants, camels, like everything. And then they just took all that and they made these very unique sounds for these aliens, and it's all practical. They didn't really do any like audio editing, like even like radios, or they're on the phone or they're Skyping. Like, they literally sat down and took a walkie-talkie, talked through it, and then filmed the other walkie-talkie and used that audio, which brings a whole nother level to the movie, especially because it's about aliens. Like, we don't know if aliens are real, but like they add this realness element into it, and I thought that was very clever of them to do, because you watch these movies and, you know, it was like, oh, that's the generic scream from every single thing, where they actually spent the time to sit down and like do their research and properly do it and make sure it sounded right and all this other stuff.
Yeah. You don't really realize just like how crisp all the audio is. Like everything is very crisp, and things have proper like resonance and bass to them. So like the sound of the heptapods is very like guttural and loud. Like especially the first time that they see them.
You take like a step back. You're like, oh, okay, I see how this. Okay, it's so intense. I keep saying intense, but it is because it's very hard to describe sound without seeing it. Or yes, because people see sound. I mean, hearing it. Anyways.
Yeah, it's just it is hard to describe without hearing it, but it's very impressive what they're able to do, and the amount of time and dedication they took to really make these refined and otherworldly noises is very cool. Another thing that I found interesting, the editor, for most of the time that he spent editing, they did not use any sort of musical tracks while he was editing. So that kind of helped the sound design a bit, in the sense that like they made sure that everything sounded how they wanted it to, and that the story worked before they started adding musical elements to it, because they didn't want the story to be carried just solely by the music. And I feel like the sound design in the story really helps build like an audible texture to, like, because the look of the movie is incredible, but the sound design really added like an audible texture to everything. Like, everything sounds very tactile and real, and I think that it really helped create this very, like you were saying, like a very realistic sense of the world in a crazy sort of event.
And you mentioned the sets, like they actually made a military set, like they have tarps and they have lights hanging up and all this other stuff. Like it's not overly drawn. There's not that like generic alarm sound that goes off and you're like, oh, that, is that sound that everybody uses. It's all real.
Yeah. In
a movie about aliens who want to come and give us a gift to help us, so we can help them in like 3,000 years, I think. Be like, that's a little far away, but sure, thank you. Yes.
We haven't even been here for 3,000 years, but sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Just very momentarily going back to the sound design thing, one other thing that I thought was interesting, they captured the sound of like wind in the mountains, and then they used that whenever, I think when the ships were leaving Earth.
Yeah. They are like the sound around the ship.
Yeah.
It's all like real wind sounds.
Yeah. They like processed them a bit, but for the most part, like it was like actual wind sound that they captured, and it made like the sound of the air like it was like bending or breaking like around the ship, which I thought was really well done and really cool.
Yeah, definitely, because the ships aren't on Earth, they're floating above the Earth, so the wind just goes right around them and everything. And there's definitely a scene where they like get there to see the aliens. They have like, they see the ship and they have the wind sounds and all this other stuff going on, and it's just this overwhelming mixture of everything, and you just sit there and you're like in the moment, like you are there. And yeah, it's a good side. Movies that can do that can draw you in and make you feel what the main character's feeling, are really good, because it means people put so much time and effort, and they're like, we need to do this to get this result because we want people to feel this way. We have other movies who are like, yeah, we're going to take like 5 or 6 characters, don't give them any backstory, and then throw them into this ridiculous mess and have some weird CGI alien creature things they're going to fight at the end. And it's like, okay, but like, what's their motive? Why should I feel the way I do towards these characters? What are their backstories? Like, what is the connection to them? And this movie has a connection. Like, yeah, not everyone can see in the future. Not everyone's going to have a kid. Hopefully, their kid doesn't die from a deadly illness or anything, but everyone has experienced like panic and fear and overwhelmness and all that. So it really, really helps ground the movie and bring it into our reality.
Yeah, I think that was a good way to put it.
It is now time for our film technique fact of the day. Our film technique of the day is a dolly zoom. A dolly zoom is a camera effect that changes the normal visual perception. This effect is done by zooming in on the subject while the camera is being pulled or pushed forward or backwards. Did you know films such as Jaws, Vertigo, and Split all have dolly zooms? Even Arrival has one, as mentioned before. It is now time for fun facts about Arrival. Well, I already said the one about Jeremy Renner's last name, which is a palindrome.
Love Jeremy Renner.
He's alright. I mean, he doesn't really do anything in the Marvel movies. He kind of just sits there. But hopefully the Hawkeye Disney Plus TV show is going to be good. I don't know if he's going to be in it, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure he is.
I mean, it would make sense. So one fun fact is that the aliens, Abbott and Costello, apparently, according to IMDb, the reason the aliens are named that is because of a episode of the BBC Sherlock, The Hounds of Baskerville. They visit a top secret research facility, and the officer mocks them and is like, "Oh, we have a pair of aliens in the basement that came here in the 60s. Their names are Abbott and Costello." Which I thought was ridiculous. Like, I don't know if they actually named those aliens after that, because that would be ridiculous, but I believe Abbott and Costello were also
They were comedians, I think.
Yeah, comedians.
Back in like the early 20th century.
Yeah. Well, according to Google, 1935. Yeah, so they were a American comedy duo. So, I mean, it makes no sense to me, but maybe there's a connection in there somewhere.
I think it was how they looked. I could be wrong, but I think one of them was like taller and slimmer, and I think the other one might have been a little shorter. And yeah. Otherwise, I don't know why his character. I mean, I guess if we're going off of the IMDb fun fact, then it was maybe just a reference to the show Sherlock. But
I feel like that would be. It's not on that same level as everything else in the movie. They're like, yeah, we're just gonna use these names because they're from Sherlock. Like, there's no connection. We just thought it would be funny.
Maybe Denise is just a really big fan of Sherlock.
Maybe.
Sherlock is a great show. You never know.
Slightly different topic, but you mentioned the director. He also directed Blade Runner 2049.
He did. Which
I did watch. It's pretty cool and very stylized, just like this movie.
Blade Runner 2049 is in my, I think, probably top 5 like favorite movies of all time. So
it was pretty high up there then.
Yeah.
Top 5 is very important. On that note, here are our final thoughts about the movie Arrival.
I would highly recommend anyone listening to please go and watch this movie.
Yes.
And just,
it's worth like the whatever dollars, $6 maybe. I don't know how much to rent it. But
I'm sure at this point you could probably find it in any like sort of, if you like buying physical media, you could probably find it in some sort of like bargain bin. Not because it's a bad movie, but just because it's been out for like 4 years and Blu-rays get mass produced by like this is a movie from like, I think it was Paramount.
Yeah, Paramount.
Yeah, so they're pretty big movie studio, so they would have a lot of distribution.
You could definitely find it. And then if you don't find it, but for some reason your town still has a movie store, go rent it. It's probably like $1.
Yeah.
And I would recommend watching it with headphones. Like, if you could watch it digitally with headphones, because then that will definitely make you super aware of the score and the sound design, which is so important to this film.
Yeah.
Of course, the editing, the shooting, everything, the plot, the script, it just all comes together to make this like wonderful piece of media that, you know, is amazing, and that I hope people have watched it. I mean, I know some people who are like, yeah, it was all right, I don't really get it, but like if you sit down and you actually pay attention to it, it's like it poses these questions about time and all this other stuff, and it just makes you wonder.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely watch it on the biggest screen and the loudest possible setup that you can
just
get.
Full on surround sound. Just the whole thing, everything. Just buy out the movie theater for a day and be like, we're just going to watch this movie on the huge screen, IMAX screen, everything.
Yeah, this is definitely like a top 10 wish I would have seen in IMAX movies for me, because that would have been amazing. But yeah. And also, please go watch Denis Villeneuve's other work because he's an amazing director. But that's a side note.
Thank you so much for being here and talking about this movie and choosing this movie. I had never seen it, and it's really good.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you again. And a big thank you to everybody who is listening. If you enjoy hearing opinions and fun facts about movies, make sure you tune in to the next podcast coming soon. Until then, bye!